Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Andrew, and welcome to the wonderful yet can be confusing world of content marketing. And more importantly, how you can use all of this digital stuff to help when it comes to your business. Now, this workshop is going to be going through the wonderful world of content marketing and what I like to call putting the so what into content marketing. Because you can create the best content in the world, but so what? What if nobody sees it? Or what if nobody takes some form of action when it comes to your marketing? And this is what we're really going to be focusing on. Yes, content is king. Yes, content is the blood of the internet. But we want to actually turn it into a business case and why we really need content marketing. And this is what this webinar is going to be about. Okay, so the most important words I'll be using in this webinar will be right now. I'll be saying this quite a lot throughout this webinar workshop. Right now, this is working. Right now, that's working, because the digital is always changing. But also because we're in the middle of a pandemic, certain things are changing at an even quicker rate. So I'll be using this word quite a lot right now. So like I said, in a year's time, some of the things that I'll show you might not work, but a lot of them should do, and I'll explain why that is the case throughout this. Now, who am I? Why am I here speaking to you? Why was I invited to talk? Now, I've only worked in digital. Throughout my whole career, that started in 2001, I've worked in digital full-time. So I'm in my third decade now. And my first job was I used to moderate chat rooms and forums for the television show Pop Idol. I don't know if anyone remembers Pop Idol, but with Will Young and Gareth Gates and Barrier, Simon Cowell's first real television show. And my job would be to moderate the chat rooms and forums, because then when it came to the internet, the only way that organizations could speak to their end users was through chat rooms, forums, and email. So I worked for Pop Idol. I then worked for Liverpool Football Club doing the same thing. Just to let you know, I don't support Liverpool. They paid well. I went with the money, to be honest. Liverpool Football Club, Sony PlayStation, and Friends Reunited. Who remembers that site? Friends Reunited. And that was my job. I used to moderate chat rooms and forums for those organizations. Now, what I learned then, 2001, all the way to now, to this second now, when it comes to digital, is that nothing has really changed professionally. And what I mean by that is, the reality is, with COVID-19 included, we still have something to sell. We still need somewhere to sell it, and we still need someone to sell it to. That hasn't changed from the time I was working at Pop Idol to now, including COVID-19. These are the same things that we always have been doing, and we always will be doing. We have something to sell, which is our product or service. We need somewhere to sell it, which is online and offline, and we need to sell it to somebody. A lot of people say, okay, let's do talks or let's do workshops on the future of digital, and this is what's going to happen in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. The reality is that after 2 years, really, a lot of it is guesswork. But one thing I do know for certain is that these three things will be the same. As long as there's the internet and as long as there's business, we still need something to sell, somewhere to sell it, and someone to sell it to. However, when people talk about change, really, they're talking about two things. And they are behavior and technology. And everything that we do when it comes to online, or anything that we do in life now, really, in a lot of cases, is to do with a behavior change or technology. And they dictate each other. So when we talk about behavior, if I go into a bit more detail, one thing I know is our attention span has just gone. You've got 5 seconds to get to the point on YouTube before someone's clicking skip that ad. Twitter, they built a whole business out of this. Get to the point in 140 characters or less. So we don't have the luxury of time anymore. And one thing that everybody is doing is fighting for attention. So one of the key behavior traits that we need to understand is how to get people's attention, because we don't have the luxury of time. Another behavior change that we've seen is the customer journey. The customer journey used to look something like this, what you see on the screen. Typical funnel. So where it says eyeballs, you may have an event, And at the end of the event, you have buyers. So you might have 100 people at the event and you might get 6 or 7 people that buys your products or service. The reality is it looks something like this now, in the sense that you may have an event where it says eyeballs, but the reality is people enter the funnel at different parts, because I might have gone to the event, but I've seen a really popular hashtag that's caught my eye, or somebody shared an image that I've liked, and that's why I've decided to find out a bit more about you. So what you've got is different people that kind of enters the funnel. And at the end, you've got 2 types of people. You've got a buyer and you've got contributors. Buyers are people who obviously buy your products or services, but contributors may not buy your product or service, but they will happily tell 1,000 of their friends. And having access to 1,000 people nowadays is not that difficult because of the internet and social media. You need both. Every organization needs both. You need buyers because obviously that's what keeps the lights on, but you also need contributors because they help when it comes to those soft metrics that are very hard to measure, but we all need. For example, authenticity, perception, impact, trust. Hard to measure metrics, but we know, especially in this digital age, these are the things that really, really count. Another thing is convenience. The power of convenience is key because the reality is, if you look at some of the biggest companies in the world, especially over the last decade, the Airbnbs, the Netflix, the Ubers, you can add Apple into this as well. You can add some of the other like Amazon as well. What they've got in common is that they're all into this convenience space. All of them are about convenience. And this is going to be a key part because how convenient is your product or service to the end user? Because this is what wins nowadays. I don't know how many people who are watching this have Netflix, but if you have Netflix, you'll understand what I'm about to say now. And that is, if you ever type a film into Netflix and it's never on Netflix, because that happens to me almost 9 times out of 10, but I still pay for Netflix because what I'm paying for is not the actual content. I'm paying for the convenience to have access to the content at my fingertips. Same as Spotify. I worked in the music industry for 10 years. I've not paid for music since the 90s, since somebody said there's a site called Napster. But I pay for Spotify. But really, I'm not paying for the music. I'm paying for the convenience to have access to the music. And this is key when it comes to your organization. How convenient is your service or your product to the end user? Because sometimes that's the reason why they might not decide to use you. So that's behavior. I can spend all day talking about behavior, but let's go to technology. And as they say, the machines are taking over. I don't think it will be the machines are taking over. I think we'll be more cyborgs than anything, half man, half machine. And if you look at this picture on the screen, you'll see that I think we are the 5th one along with the man holding the robot. But the reality is that it's not a robot. The reality is that little robot is this, our phone. Something that we're addicted to. If we leave at home, we'll say things like, oh, I think our arm is missing. But the reality is we can't avoid AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation. It's part of our day-to-day life now. And we're going to see it more and more over the next few years. Now, there is this myth. Well, it's not really a myth, actually. There is this saying where they said the machines are taking over. But I don't think machines will get rid of all types of people. I think machines will get rid of functional people, not vital people. Functional people, for example, you go to a supermarket now, where before you had the checkouts, now you've got self-service checkouts. You go to a McDonald's, where before you used to go to the counter to order, now you order on a big tablet. That's what the machines are doing. They're getting rid of functional people. Uber and the push towards self-driving cars. Vital is where, as humans, we really should be focusing on. Because, for example, data is functional. Acting on the data is functional. Interpreting or the interpretation of the data, that's a vital skill. And that's one of a few vital skills that's going to be key moving forward. When we look at the platforms, The social media platforms, where obviously a lot of content is, and the reality is a lot of people will say social media is essentially the internet 2.0. If you look at some of the major established platforms, the likes of the Facebooks, the Twitters, the LinkedIns, the Pinterest, the YouTubes, really focusing on their advertising offering, really focusing on keeping people onto the site. And obviously some of them are on the stock market. So obviously increasing the value of their stocks. If you look at some of the emerging ones, the Instagram, the WhatsApp, the Snapchats, that's emerged over the last 3 or 4 years. These are the sites that, again, always looking at tweaking some of the functionality or adding new offerings. For example, Instagram has created Instagram Reels, which is a competitor to TikTok, which has grabbed a lot of market share, especially during the pandemic. So all of these platforms are always evolving, just like with all technology. They're always evolving. They're always looking to get new users or keep the users and obviously monetize all this attention. But the reality is this: mobile changed everything. When it comes to your mobile, you need to look at it as you've got your business in your customer's pocket, and they will walk around with your business for 16, 17 hours a day. Usually the first thing they check in the morning, last thing they check at night. So mobile, when it comes to technology, was the big game changer over the last 10 years. But the reality is this: I often say to people, yes, there are behavior changes. Yes, there's technology changes. But in 2020 and going into 2021, the most important thing that we need to really figure out is justification, or what I like to call the so what. And for this, what is the so what behind content marketing? Now, I've worked and I've trained and I've consulted and I've given talks to many organizations, especially in the public sector. I know some people watching this are in the public sector, some people in the private sector as well. But for organizations that's similar to yours, I'm going to give you 9 reasons why organizations over the years, and from my experience, have been using content marketing. So some are doing it to raise awareness. Okay, well, we've got a new product, we've got a new campaign with the organization. How can we use content to raise awareness about us? And that's one reason why organizations have been using it. Another is for data and research. The amount of information that's available to you for free now is at an all-time high. So what we want to be able to do is get this information, and as I was saying earlier on, make it make sense to our business, and ideally your business objectives. And this is why some people are using content. It's not so much to create content, it's for the data that they get from the content. Some people are doing it to build brand and credibility. The reality is building brand and credibility in a world where trust is on its way down and authenticity and being authentic is on the way up. This plays a big part, and content does this. Content does the talking for you. Building an engaged audience. You are either building your own audience or you're leveraging someone else's. And if you're leveraging someone else's, it's going to cost you time or money. So building an audience is key when it comes to this digital world that we live in. So content is a very good way to do that. Part of the sales cycle. The reality is we have a business. So whether it be if you're in the B2B world, and that's usually when I say sales cycle, targeted or warm leads or even hot leads, or if you're B2C, more selling to the customers, direct to the customers, it can be used as part of the sales cycle. Positioning and thought leadership. This is very important, especially if you're in the world of B2B or in the public sector. How can we position ourselves in a particular market? And how can we use thought leadership to be seen as an expert to position ourselves in particular niches as well? So content is a great way to do that, be it video content, be it white paper reports, whatever it may be. Networking. The reality is these businesses, Facebook or the social networks, the LinkedIns, they were built for people. It's just that when you've got 2 billion people on one platform, organizations are naturally going to go there. So networking still plays a very, very big part. And the reality is, if we put anything on the internet, it's content. So that content is how we network, whether it be text, whether it be images, whether it be videos. Reaching different audiences. The beauty of this world that we live in now, especially with social media, is you can target. You can have 5 or 6 different audiences you want to reach, which means your content can be different for 5 or 6 different audiences. In the traditional world, unless you had money or very good PR to get onto television, it will be very difficult, even once on television, to target people on television as well. So that plays a big part. And last, increasing website traffic. We've got all of this website coming to we've got all of this content on social media. We can only say so much. How do we get people to our website? Or if you want to be a bit more advanced, once they're onto the website, if they go somewhere else, how can we create content to target advertising to them? So as you can see here, that's 9. There are others. Crisis management, I can put in there. Reputation management, I can add in there. Education, I can add in there. Recruitment. But here are just 9. Now, in my experience working in social media, as well as content, you realize after a while that this is just one big game. Everything we're doing online is one big game. And what you're seeing here, these are the rules of the game. The raise awareness, to networking, to building an engaged audience. These are the rules of the game. Most people don't set rules. So when it comes to their content, they just create stuff. So what we want to do first is decide, what are we doing content for? Why are we doing it? How is it connected to an objective? Now, how you go about using social media, how you go about using content really depends on the rules. For example, if you wanted to do data research, you'd probably be doing more listening to content. Okay, who's having the conversations? What platforms are they having these conversations? Are influencers involved? Are other brands involved? Are other competitors involved? What hashtags are people using? And you'll be using social media more from a monitoring point of view, and you're monitoring the content. If it was for positioning and thought leadership, you may create a piece of content that will be, let's say, for example, a really well-produced video. And once you click publish, you then have a strategy of what to do, a checklist of these 6, 7 things that we need to do to get our message out there. But if it was to increase website traffic, what you might want to do is short pieces of content with strong calls to action. Okay, short piece might be a small image with a strong call to action, because really you just want people to click on that link. So how you go about using content really depends on the rules of the game that we set. So hopefully that makes sense, because this is one of the most important slides that I'll be showing you today, because as I said, everything revolves around this. How you go about using content, how you go about using digital really revolves on the objectives, or what I like to call the so what factors behind everything. Okay, so what I do now is I'm a trainer and I do a lot of talks, and I've probably spoken to well over 11,000 people all over the world, all different organizations of all different sizes, all different challenges, all different needs, wants as well. And after a while, the same questions keep on coming up. The same questions and the same challenges and the same needs and the same wants keep on coming up. And I realized that if you can answer 3 questions, you will have success in content. Because the reality is, what we need to answer is, what content can we create? How can we get that content to the relevant people? And what can we get them to do? What content can I create? How can I target that content to the relevant people? And what can I get them to do? Or if you want 3 words, create, distribute, convert. And that will be at the center of any digital, any content strategy, because you need to create something for people to find your content in the first place. But you can create the best content in the world, but if nobody sees it, so what? So we need to promote that. But if you're good at creating content and you can't promote that content, if you're good at creating content and you're good at promoting that content, but you can't convert, you have a hobby. And this is what separates personal use of digital to professional. So we need to know how to convert. The reality is this: digital, or especially content and social media, is simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. Hence why you've got 15-year-old millionaires doing this. Hence why you've got young adults who are like 21 years old that owns digital agencies that are making 7 figures a month. It's not rocket science. We're not trying to create Google's algorithm. We're not trying to work with Amazon's machine learning. What we're trying to do is create content, promote that content, and get our end users or our target audience to take some form of action. So create, distribute, convert. So moving forward, with the so what included, I'm now going to go a bit more detail for each part, because as I said, when it comes to a strategy, all strategies online, when it comes to digital, will have some form of creation, some form of promotion, and some form of conversion. So let's look at create. Now, when it comes to creating content, I learned this once I left Pop Idol. So I was working at Pop Idol and my parents said, get a proper job, because working on the internet wasn't a proper job back in 2002. So they said, get a proper job. And I left the comforts of working at Pop Idol, working from home, to work at the BBC. And I was part of the team to launch Radio 1 Extra. So for about 4.5 years, I used to produce radio shows at the BBC. Now, I learned a number of things when I was at the BBC, but the thing that I learned probably that stood out to me the most was creating digital content. Because then I created radio shows for radio. Now I watch radio on a video platform via my phone, if that makes sense. Because content is not linear anymore. Content is multi-purpose, and it's really important to understand that. Now, when it comes to content, when it comes to digital as well, there's a split. And the split in digital is the visual focused web and the community focused web. The visual focused web is the part of the internet where you do not need a community for people to see your content. For example, YouTube. You can upload a video to YouTube and I could just go and search, type in whatever it is, and your video can come up. Or I can be watching a video and it's got related videos here, and then I can watch that video. So you don't necessarily need a community for people to see your content. With the community focused web, I need something first for you to see my content. And that could be, let's say, for example, I cannot send you a WhatsApp message without your phone number. I cannot email you without your email address. Most of the time, I cannot reach you on Facebook and your business page without following you, without connecting to your page. Same as LinkedIn, same as Twitter. So these are some of the reasons why it's important to understand the difference between the visual and the community-focused web. Look at this analogy. I always look at the visual focused web is, imagine you've got a shop, and the visual focused web is someone outside the shop flyering to get people into the shop. Because that's essentially what it does. It drives traffic. Now, if you're good at that and getting people into the shop, but nobody is in the shop looking after them, people will leave. If you look at the community focused web, the community focused web is like saying you're in the shop and nobody's coming through the door. And you've got the best decor, you've got the best lights, you've got the best carpet, you've got the best technology in the shop, but nobody's coming through the door. And instead of saying, right, how do we get more traffic? You say, okay, maybe it's the walls. Let's paint the walls a different color. Or maybe it's the tills. We need to change the tills, but nobody's coming through the door. It's the equivalent of looking at your Facebook page and thinking, how do I get more likes? Or I seem to be speaking to the same people. How do I speak to other people? Because the key when it comes to your content or the flow of content is the visual web and the community focused web. Driving traffic, some form of action happens, and then you look after them. And then once they're in the content focus, community focused web, that's usually where you can sell, because they get to know you, they get to like you, they get to trust you. So content, as I said earlier on, is multi-purpose. The reality is we can take this video here that we've got, that I'm doing now, and we can put it into many different clips, short second clip, like 50-second clips that we can put on many different platforms. So that's videos. We could also take out some of the images that you see on the screen. We can take those out, and then that can go on different platforms as well. So same content, videos, and now we've got images. We can also extract the audio. So we can go to sites and download the MP3 of the video, and that could be little sound bites we can put on websites, or you can turn it into a podcast or feature it on a podcast. So we've got audio, and also we can transcribe this. Everything I'm saying, we can transcribe. And so with one video, we've created many video clips, we've created images, we've created audio, and we've created text. And that text could go onto your website, your blog, whatever it may be. As I said, content is multi-purpose now. What we want to be able to do when it comes to our content is not necessarily create more content. Google will tell you to do that. YouTube, Facebook will tell you to do that because they get paid off of your content. The key is, how do I get the most out of my content? Because people can consume the same message, but in different formats. And that, a lot of it is based on convenience. Sometimes I want to watch videos. Sometimes I don't want to watch the whole 20-minute video when I can just see an image, which is just a summary of everything. I might be in the gym, so actually I want to listen to what you're saying. And then also you've got some people that will say, okay, they'll go to their secretary and ask him or her to print it off, and then they can read it on the train home. Same content, same message, but think to yourself, okay, how can I make it more convenient for the end user? So this is a really big part when it comes to content, creation of content. Now, other things you can do is use sites. The internet works off the basic principles of economics, which is supply and demand. And there's many different sites that you can use. And I'll show you a guide where you can find different sites. But one of the sites I like to use, Google Trends. If you don't know Google Trends, really handy site. In fact, I'll just quickly jump on it now for you guys to have a look at. So it's google.co.uk/trends, and it looks at Google's data. Now, the reason I like to use this site is because what it does is you type in any keyword or phrase, and it gives you the trend over a period of time of that particular word. Now, what I do is called internet marketing. So if I typed in internet marketing, now rather than the UK, I'm just going to give you an example of, rather than UK, I'll do worldwide. Rather than the past 12 months, I'm going to do 2004. And the trend for internet marketing over that particular time looks like this, which may make you think to yourself, that's odd. If anything, over the last 16 years, internet marketing has increased. And I thought the same thing. So I looked at other similar words. So one of the words I typed in was digital marketing. And I got this. So I said, okay. So what's happening here is what I call it has changed. What I do hasn't. And this is really key. Sometimes it's not the content, it's the context. So people obviously round about, and I can tell you when, round about February, 2012, 2013, more and more people were going on the internet, typing digital marketing and internet marketing. So I just changed my content from internet marketing to digital marketing. The content stayed exactly the same. The context changed. And you need to look at the internet works on the basic principles of economics, which is supply and demand. So what we need to do is we need to look at the demand and use tools like Google Trends, because that's what we're eventually going to supply. So Google Trends is a really good tool. Other things you can do on Google Trends, if I just type in, I don't know, bin collection, just get rid of this. I want to compare it to digital marketing, but let's go here and let's make it United Kingdom. And rather than 2004, let's go for the past 5 years. Because the other thing I want to know is if there's any ups and downs, is there any peaks and troughs over 5 years? So when I look at bin collection, I noticed that there's always a spike. Well, there's definitely a spike, a big spike, but there's also some smaller spikes. Now, I want to know, is this spike always at the same time every year? So if I go here, the big spike is December, like Christmas time, December. Now, my assumption would be usually people will say, okay, when do we put the bins out over Christmas? But again, that's an assumption we make, but Google's data also supports this. That's what people are typing. But also, what are these smaller ones? So this is kind of like March, April time, and this is August, September. This is April time, and this is August, September. This is March, April time. This is August, September. And I'm assuming April time, August, September, this is March. And I'm assuming August, which has just happened, yeah, you can see it's gone up. So if I was working off what I'm doing, if it's connected to do with bin collection, and I'll look at other words similar to this as well, I know that when it comes to content, I'll be creating more and more content round about November time, because that's what people are going to be searching for in December. Round about February, because I know in March and April, that's what people are going to be searching. June, July, because I know they're going to be searching in August. So use this technology that's available to you for free to help when it comes to planning your content. And again, you can just kind of just go down the page and you can see pretty much bin collection, Christmas. Yeah, pretty much what I thought. So that is Google Trends. Very, very handy tool if you don't know it. Another way to count content is know the calendar. Every day is a day of something. There's all these awareness day calendars that you can look at and you can find online. Just type in awareness day calendars. But every day it's usually a day of something. So whenever you're watching this, just go to Twitter. Just go to Twitter and look at their trending topics. Ideally earlier on in the day, because you will see certain things that will be trending. Now, if you can, this is something you can plan as well. So if you know the calendar, if you know certain dates that's going to be relevant to you, you know attention will be on those dates. That's another way you can come up to create content. Instagram is another interesting place when it comes to content, because Instagram in 2020 are experimenting with removing likes. So content's going to play a very big part. Hashtags is going to be very important. Storytelling is key. The reality is, forget Instagram. Everything you do on the internet, when it comes to your content, you're telling a story. It's just that most people are telling a bad story. So what makes a good story? These are things that we need to look at. If you're going to use Instagram, if you're going to do videos, subtitling videos is key. If you're going to work with influencers, that's another big part. They will create a lot of the content for you because they know what works. In fact, influencers became popular because of their content and also because of how they share their content. And stories is king as well when it comes to Instagram. Not telling the story, but the functionality of stories, because stories is the only thing on the internet that gives you 100% reach in social media wise. If you're just posting something on Facebook to your business page, you're not getting that type of reach. Stories is the only thing with 100% reach. The key for stories is how do you get to the front of the queue? And as you can see, stories has become very, very effective right now. The reality is this: you are now in the content business. You are a media company by default. Whatever business you are that stroke media company. Because if you've uploaded anything to the internet, which I'm assuming everyone has, because I'm sure everyone's got at least a website, you're in the content business. So you're competing with the BBC, CNN, Channel 4, and that 15-year-old YouTuber in her bedroom. So you are competing against them because everybody is fighting for attention. So you need to think like a media company. So let's go to the next part, which is distribution. Now, when I left the BBC, I was doing a show in San Francisco, and I was approached by a small startup company that just been bought by Rupert Murdoch for about 600 million. And they said, there is this new thing called social networking and social media, and you should get involved. It's going to be the next big thing. And I decided to leave the comforts of the BBC, almost working in the perfect job, to take a gamble. And it was the biggest gamble of my career, because I left the BBC and I was part of the team to launch MySpace. Now, I don't know if anyone remembers MySpace, but MySpace was kind of like the first social media site that made it big. I'm talking like on a global business. When I was at MySpace, when I joined, there's probably about 30 to 40 million people on the site. And within a year, we took that up to 250 million. And it became the biggest website in the world, even overtaking Google for a few months. But a year later, we lost about 100 million. So I know what to do and what not to do. So do this, avoid that. Now, I joined MySpace when Facebook was only available to students, when 90% of YouTube's traffic was on MySpace, and the tweet was just something you heard from the birds. So it was a completely different world then. But what I learned from MySpace, and this is what I'm going to be telling you, is once you've created content, how do people find it? Or what I like to say, you've created the best content in the world, so what? How are people going to find it? Don't know if you've heard this saying, content is king. And it's a famous saying, content is king. All you need is great content. Build great content and people will come. And there is truth to that. But the reality is this. It's not going to happen. We're not in 2009 anymore, where you can just put content up and it would just rank in Google, but hardly doing anything. We need to be a bit more strategic. And one of the first things we need to identify is how people find your content. Because I worked in the music industry, I've met a lot of talented broke singers. Amazing voice, no one's heard of them. I worked with the government as well, and I worked with 500 startups over a year, trained 500 startups, tech startups. Amazing technology, no one's heard of them. Exactly the same challenge. And I come across this quite a lot. Amazing what you do, no one's heard of you, or the relevant people haven't heard of you, or enough people's not heard of you. And I call this the talented broke singer syndrome. Now, one of the first things we need to identify is how people are going to find us in the first place. And on the internet, there's only 3 ways people are going to find anything you put online. Not including going to a specific URL, i.e. yourwebsite.com, or advertising. There's only 3 ways people will find anything you put on the internet. And they are, if you're trying to guess the ways, pause it now for a bit. But the 3 ways is search, i.e. somebody typed in some keywords, share, somebody shared a piece of content and it appears in your newsfeed, or stumble, and that is you found it by accident. I cannot think of any other ways. And if you can, reach me on my LinkedIn and let me know. Ideally, let it begin with an S, makes my life a lot easier. But essentially, what we're looking at doing is working out how can people find our content, and not including advertising or going to a direct URL. People are either going to search some keywords, somebody shared it with them, and within that, I can put recommendations, word of mouth, retweeting, forwarding, or stumbled. And that is you found it by accident. And that is, have you ever been on YouTube and you're watching a video and it's got related videos and you're like, oh, what's this video? And you click on that video and another video and another video. And 3 hours later, you're still on YouTube. What's happening there is you went from one thing and ended up somewhere completely different. And that is to do with the algorithms. So we need to identify keywords. We need to answer the question, why would anybody share our content? And we need to understand the algorithm of the website that we're using. Because if we don't, no one's going to see your content, unfortunately. When it comes to sharing, The reality is you're defined now by what you share rather than where you click. So that's why people are building careers like all these influencers, because we're defined by what we share rather than where you click. So as I said, Neil Patel's Uber Suggest is another tool that you can look at when it comes to seeing what type of content people are sharing. But when it comes to algorithms or Stumble, it's really important to kind of understand the basic fundamental principles of algorithms. Now, I'm going to use Facebook this time to do it. Now, algorithms change all the time. And Gary Vaynerchuk, as an entrepreneur, he said, marketers ruin everything. Because what tends to happen is marketers work out a way to game the system. So game the system would be, I've worked out how to rank #1 in Google by doing hardly nothing. And then Google has to make the changes. So you drop to page 7, and then marketers will try and work out how to get to the top of Google. And it just goes on and on and on. So marketers ruin everything, especially for the platforms. So one of the key things that we need to understand is algorithms. And for Facebook, the key thing for Facebook is getting your content in the newsfeed, because that's where the attention is. So what we need to look at is, how do we get our content in the newsfeed? Now, Facebook has hundreds of different factors, but the main 4, and the reason why I say for Facebook, but understand that this is relevant for pretty much all of the platforms. The main 4 include affinity, and that is how much engagement you have around a piece of content. So if you put up a piece of content, let's say if it's a video, and you've got, the end user can do 4 things with the video, or 5 things really. They can watch, but the main thing they can do when it comes to interacting is they can like, they can leave a share, they can leave a comment, or they can leave some form of reaction, angry, smiley face, tear, whatever it may be. That's how you can start conversations online. What we're seeing is that these ways to engage are all different levels. So for example, a reaction is worth more to Facebook than a like. So if you've got a piece of content with loads of likes, and then you've got another piece of content with, or your competitors got a piece of content with more reactions, or not as many reactions as your likes, but if it's relatively near, Facebook will probably prioritize the one with the reactions, because reactions are worth more than likes right now. So affinity around a piece of content is key. Now, the next thing is type. So the type of content plays a big part. So on Facebook, if you've been on Facebook for more than 3 years, you'll probably seen that over the last few, say 2-3 years, a lot more video. And then there was a stage where a lot of live video. If you're on Instagram, you're probably seeing a lot of reels at the moment. And the reason being is because the type of content plays a big part, because where 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, you might see events, yes, no, maybe, or you might see people throwing donkeys and zombies at you because of the apps. That's what they were pushing. But now they're not really pushing that. So for example, you start seeing the same piece of content come up again, or the same type of content. Now, if you've got, for example, just text with loads of affinity, and then you've got a live video with not as much affinity, Facebook could prioritize the video with not as much affinity because they're trying to push videos. So the type of content plays a big part. And right now, videos and images are on Facebook. They're the ones that kind of are the ones that kind of like the main ones. Another factor is time. You can have a video with loads of affinity and loads of reactions, but if this was 2 weeks ago, it's not going to appear on the newsfeed. So with Facebook, you've pretty much got 24 hours to get the most out of that content. So when you upload something to Facebook, you need to be, as I said, when I talked about positioning and thought leadership, you need to know what to do once you click publish. So you have a plan, you have a checklist of what to do. And that's Facebook. On Instagram, you've got like 24 minutes. And some of the other ones, let's say Twitter, depending on how many people you're following, that could be 24 seconds before more content kind of goes into your feed. The last thing is keeping people on the site. Now, if you've got a piece of content, great content, a lot of affinity, loads of people are leaving messages. It happened about 3 hours ago, but you've got a link sending people off of Facebook, Facebook will decrease your reach. The reason being is, one, they don't want people going off of Facebook. And secondly, if they increased your reach, because you've got a link on it, that's essentially what an advert does. So why would they give you more reach when you can pay for that? So that's edge ranking, and that's the really important to understand, because this is key to most algorithms. In fact, most algorithms in the social media platforms. Now, the other thing that's really important in distribution is understanding the conversation. So conversation or interaction or engagement, and these are words that you might often hear. But when we talk about conversation online, it's exactly the same as a conversation offline. Listen, interpret, respond. What did you say? What does that mean to me? What shall I say? Exactly the same online. Most people online are focused on response. What do I put on Facebook? What do I put on Twitter? What do I put on LinkedIn? What do I put on YouTube? But I can tell you this right now, the money is made from the listening and the interpretation. What are people saying? What does that mean to me? Because if you know what people are saying and you can make it relevant to you, it dictates the response. And without speaking to you, I know that one of your challenges will be time. So how do we save time? And this is one of the ways to do that. Now, another thing as well when it comes to conversations is to keep that conversation going. How do we continue keeping that conversation going? And earlier on, I said creating content is a challenge, and Google and Facebook will tell you to do that. And unless you're a news team, it's very difficult to keep on and on and on creating content, 4, 5, 6 pieces of content a day. One of the key things I'll say to people is be a DJ. And what I mean by that is a DJ gets paid a substantial amount of money to play other people's music. Substantial amount. And we can do the same. And this is what's called content curation. So rather than create content, you can curate content. You can look at content that you think will be relevant to your end user, and you can share it with them. So someone else might have created a video or an infographic or something. You can put it onto your Twitter feed or whatever platform, share it. You might want to add a sentence or two, but ultimately what you're doing is you're curating content. You're using other people's content and you're playing the music to your end users. And by doing that, when people like the content, if they like that, then they're liking your feed, not someone else's. They might like the content someone else has done, but you're the one that's almost going to get credit for it. So this is one of the things that I suggest everybody in their content marketing strategy or their content strategy, curating content plays a big part. So we've looked at creating content. We've looked at ways to promote content, search, share, stumble, and keep that conversation going, listening, interpreting, responding. And one way that we can keep that conversation going is using other people's content, because essentially you can create content, which I've shown you. You can curate content, be the DJ, or you can document. Documenting content is just me putting this phone up, press it, going live, and putting it to Instagram. So I'm actually not creating, I'm more documenting what I'm doing. So they're the 3 key parts. But ultimately, we want to convert. We want to get people to take some form of action and to measure. Now, I learned this really when I left MySpace, because when I left MySpace back in 2009, for the last 11 years, I've been going all over the world, training all organizations of all sizes, of all industries, how to use the internet to do X, Y, and Z. And I started off really training in schools and education. Then I started working with a lot of big ad agencies. And then after that, pretty much everybody else. And I've trained around about 11,000 people and hundreds of organizations. And I realized that pretty much everybody is trying to focus on 2 different areas, or 2 different areas as key. And these are 2 things that I really focus, especially when I'm working with content. One is the user journey. How do I go about, or what's the user journey when someone's just on their phone doing whatever to ultimately getting ultimately you're getting them to do something you want them to do. And that could be to buy a product or a lead. And the second bit is so what. So we've looked at the so what, but also the user journey is key. And this is what I really focus on now. And if you want people to take action in the user journey, I often say most people will not get married on the first date. Now, I had to add the word most in because I was watching some American reality TV show and people were getting married on the first time they met each other. But I'll say most people will not get married on the first date, because the reality is, if anybody's going to take some form of action when it comes to you getting them to do something online, they need to know you first, they need to like you, and they need to trust you. If they don't know you, if they don't like you, if they don't trust you, they're not going to take any form of action. They know you because of your content. They like you because of your content. They trust you because of your personality and your content. Once that's reached, then they'll take action. And this is so, so, so important. Because if you look at some of the best websites in the world, like Amazon, when it comes to converting, by the time you get to, I've seen something on the internet the book is in my hand. Amazon's got it down to one click. From when you see something on the internet, once you reach Amazon, so the book is in my hand, they've got it down to a click now. And they know that, but when someone's going to buy something, they've ticked the no box, they've ticked the like box, and they've ticked the trust box. And then they've just got to make it very easy for someone, or convenient for someone, to take that form of action. So content is really important when it comes to this, because content is the thing that answers kind of all four of those. No, like, trust, yes, but the action is going to be some form of content that you're going to do, whether it be a click here button, or buy now button, or fill out a form. It's all content. Which takes us full circle back to here. So when it comes to conversion, what are we converting? I said we're playing a game, but what are we measuring? What is success? And a lot of it goes down to this, because what we decide to do online really depends on the rules of the game that we set, as I mentioned earlier on. Now, when it comes to content, there's different ways to measure, but some ways you can measure is looking at vanity. So you've got your vanity metrics, because your content ultimately helps you build your let's say your network, and the vanity metrics would be people following your page. It could be people connecting with your page. It could be your email list. All of these vanity metrics, but the reality is they can be gained. There's a site called Social Blade, which is a really good site to kind of look at following and connections and followers. Then you've got your conversational or direct response metrics. Now, this is a bit more content based. How many people shared your content, and who shared your content? How many people commented on your content, and who commented on your content? How many people reacted to your content, and who reacted to your content? Did your content spark conversations? Did your content help you increase your organic reach so you can reach more people, i.e. get more awareness? How fast are you responding to people? If someone's complaining, how fast are you responding? Someone's complaining, putting content to you, how fast are you responding back with your content? And again, you've got many different platforms that can go about doing this. And obviously, what you can do here is very, very important. And then you've got your conversion metrics. How many people downloaded your report? How many people bought your products? How many people went to your website? How did you deal with a crisis? How many people downloaded your app? How many websites were you featured on? How many warm leads did you get? And these are more the conversion metrics. But as I said right at the beginning, you're going to have buyers and you're going to have contributors, and you need to measure for both. You can't, if we need both, you need to measure for both. And the contributors is more the conversational metrics, and the buyers are more the conversion metrics. I get this question a lot though. ROI. What's the ROI of content? Again, it's difficult to say really, because content is it's not linear. It's not a linear game. It's not like advertising. So when it comes to ROI, there's a really great quote I heard, and it was, ROI is a relay race. Reaching the finish lines requires multiple passes of the baton. You do not credit a win to an individual racer. You distribute credit to the entire team. So when it comes to what you're doing, when it comes to using content in the digital world. Content might be used for the awareness stage, but content will then go with, let's say, for example, advertising or influencer marketing, but content will be part of that. The second stage, the consideration stage, this might be using content in the social media world. The third stage might be the nurturing stage, and this might be content when it comes to your emails. And the fourth stage is the conversion stage, and that would be using content to do that. But what you want to do is you want to measure accordingly, because your content for the awareness stage, let's say influencer marketing, or let's say SEO, you don't want to turn around and say, okay, well, if it was the first stage, we can't measure that against, did we win the race? If you're the first leg and you got off to an amazing start, if you didn't win the race, you can't say, oh, it was the first leg's fault. But that's how you might have focused your content strategy. You might say, right, our content is really just focused on the first leg. After that, we can get them on the phone, we can meet them face to face, etc. So what we want to do is measure accordingly. If there's a relay race, if you're watching the news, the highlights, you see Usain Bolt go down the last bit. But the reality, and win the race. But the reality is Usain Bolt never takes it in 8th and win the race. He's fast, but he's not that fast. He usually gets it in 1st or 2nd and then wins the race. So what we want to be able to do when it comes to your content, your content marketing strategy, let's say, for example, is about raising awareness, you want to measure accordingly. You're not going to punish the person who went first, who got off to a great start and got you guys in a winning position, and then punish them because you didn't win the race, because that actually was fine. What we need to work out is what happened next. Your content could be the first leg or maybe your second leg as well. That was fine. But what happened afterwards? But if you think in these terms, then it's easier to work out where the problem lied. So this is key when it comes to ROI in the digital world, unless you're doing stuff like advertising. But if you're using content mainly for, say, social media or just general content, you want to be looking at more towards like a relay race. And the last thing I want to add when it comes to content is dark social. Now, when I say dark social, I don't mean the dark web. Dark social is just more to do with messaging, or as the kids say, sliding in the DMs. It's messaging. And as you can see by the stat, 75% of all social media appears in the social web. It appears in the dark social web, so the messaging. And when I'm messaging you, it's all content. So just be aware of that as well. So when everyone's playing the same game, your execution is critical. Everyone is putting out content on the internet. That you have to, if you've got a website, you're in this game. But what is important is going beyond the creation, because most people's content marketing strategy is, let's create more content, let's create more content, let's create more content. But really a good content marketing strategy is, yes, we create content, but we then need people to find that content. We then need people to engage with that content and have conversations with that content. And then we need people to convert or take some form of action. So most people might focus on the 25% creating, but what I want to show you, and hopefully I've shown you, is that creating content is just 25% of the overall thing. Creating content, yes, but we also need people to find it. We need people to engage with it, and we need people to convert and take some form of action. So there you have it. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to ask any questions, feel free to reach me on LinkedIn, Twitter. There's my email if you want, or as I said, there's the guide as well. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully it's made you look at content differently, and good luck.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today here at Squiz Summit, and welcome to today's session, which is on killer content and making every word fight for its life. My name is Peter Craig, and I lead the creative services team across Australia and New Zealand. And with me, I have the rather marvellous Mel Cook, who is a senior UX consultant, and let's face it, the brains behind much of what we're going to hear about today. So we wanted to talk about killer content, and what do we mean by this, and why does it matter? Well, we're going to look at it through some interesting facts as well as through a little bit of storytelling, but maybe to kick things off, let's have a look at a quote from this author, whose name is Crawford Killian, and he says that every sentence, every phrase, and every word has to fight for its life. So why does this matter for user experience? Well, we work with clients across Australia and New Zealand, and we see all sorts of different types of sites and different approaches to sites and maintaining sites. And one of the things that's really clear to us is that good content is foundational to great user experience. And it's also one of the things that we have the most direct daily control over. So to talk a little bit more about why this matters and why our words should fight to help us, Mel's got some interesting facts to look at.
Okay, so let's start with a fact that is very close to my own heart. Time is our most valuable asset. Like I'm a mother of 3 children. I also work here at Squiz a good part of my week, so I need to, as a consumer, be discerning about what brings me joy. And I would ask that you all do the same. Avoid the bait, make your clicks count. Our days are our lives. As content creators, we're tasked with an even greater responsibility. We have other people's time on our hands, and many of these people have diverse needs. There's very few of us that have time to kill. So we're going to be talking about today what you can do to make the most of your audience's time, to make your content fight, because winning content is more available to more people.
And behind this, there's actually really good research into the way users behave. And we've got a few things here that help illustrate why every word on your website really does matter. And the first one here is from the Nielsen Norman Group, and it talks about how whilst users have time to read around 20% of the words on the page, in reality, they'll probably only read 20% of the text. So your words have to fight. They have to be impactful. People still primarily scan rather than read. And that's important because when people are scanning, they're not doing it linearly. They're jumping around, skipping content, coming back. And so again, for your words to be seen and understood and remembered, they have to fight. And also just on jargon there, it's another thing that we come across quite a lot in the client space. And there's an interesting quote that it talks about groups of people forming their own private lexicons because coded language is exclusive and it's exciting, but for the user, they may not know what it means. So policy speak, legal speak, jargon, that's probably not helping words fight.
Yeah, and on the straight up accessibility facts, it's good for us to keep in mind that 1 in 5 Australians live with a disability. That's a huge number if you think about it. 44% of Australians have a literacy level of 1 to 2. That's a really low level. So WCAG criteria says that the more readable you make your content, the better. And it recommends that you write to a lower secondary education level. So roughly writing to about a grade 8 student. If you write at that level, you'll get to about 80% of a general public audience. And, like if you're writing about public health, if you're writing about all these types of content that we write on the day-to-day, it's really important that we write at that level because it's more likely to be accessed by more people. And we'll wrap up with a really lovely quote here from Steve Krug, who's the author of Don't Make Me Think, which is a fabulous book title. And he said, "How many opportunities do we have to dramatically improve people's lives just by doing our job a little bit better?"
That's absolutely right. And it comes back to that point again of good content that fights being really foundational to great user experience on websites. And it's for that reason that we wanted to focus on this theme in today's session. Well-chosen words have a huge impact on the success of the site. And we actually want to explore this idea a little bit further now with a story.
Okay, so Peter and I both worked in comms teams before we worked at Squiz, and we're pretty familiar with how things go.
So today what we're going to do is take you on a fictional journey that was typical of our time producing web content for government, education and the private sector.
Yeah, so on this trip, we'll come across opportunities to take one path or another, an accessible but slightly longer path, or a shorter, slightly bumpier path.
And we're going to freeze frame these decision points.
Yep, just like Ebenezer Scrooge in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, we'll look through windows at our former and future selves and see what might have happened if we'd made the words fight in those moments.
There'll be no Christmas spirits because the year's not over yet, but let's now step into an imagined reality for a few minutes.
Okay, it's just a regular day, the phones are ringing, the day ahead is likely to be long, and I had to create a web page about our new community sponsorship initiative. This was an opportunity for all kinds of not-for-profits to get the funding they so desperately needed.
We already had a media release as well as a brochure we'd distributed, but we'd put the actual new web page on the back burner. Mel said she'd get the copy into a new page in the afternoon and have it to me by 4 p.m. for proof and publication, and that way we could link to a live page in emails that were due to go out the next day.
It was 3 p.m. I was pushing close to deadline, so I quickly just dropped the copy into the page. The header formatting didn't look quite right. It was header 1, header 2, header 3, but the first and second headers looked too similar, so I started with the H2, then jumped to a H4. It looked a lot nicer on the page.
And it looked good to me too, so I just changed the matrix status to approve and make live. But this is where we hit our first freeze frame, because our words were not fighting.
And so as we looked through the window, we saw Jo, a vision-impaired volunteer leader of a local scouting group. She was searching for opportunities to raise funds and came across our site. Her screen reader jumped around the page and in a logical order due to the headers I'd used. So the information I'd carefully curated on the page didn't make much sense to her. It all seemed too hard. She decided not to apply for funding that she would likely have received. Not a great outcome.
Definitely not a great outcome. So back to our story. I mentioned before that we already had a media release and a brochure. The new web page was based on the brochure because it was a little bit more conversational. Even though probably the media release had the more important information at the top, we still went with the brochure approach. But you guessed it, that leads to our next freeze frame where our words were not fighting.
Yeah, okay, so this time we looked through the window at Craig, who tends to use an F-shaped or spotted scanning pattern. Like most people who read web pages, he only scans about 20 or reads about 20% of the actual content on the page. Unfortunately, he missed the part on eligibility. We got more calls and ineligible submissions than we would have if that information was more prominent. Probably wasted about 20 hours of company time. Again, not ideal.
And again, back to our story. We've always been guilty of not publishing a meta description. We sort of assumed that Google algorithms would likely ignore this text anyway. And it's really just not something I had on my list of things to check, but you guessed it. Again, this time our hidden words were not fighting.
Yeah, I get all the freeze frame fun. So the page ranked poorly for keywords like New South Wales Community Group sponsorship, and we didn't get as many applicants as we would have liked. If more people had seen the page in external search listings, we would have had a more diverse selection of applicants. We probably would have had better stories to tell, and we could have had more leverage in how we met our corporate social responsibility and engaged with a wider audience.
We also noticed an issue that was caused by duplicate material. So the search algorithms actually preferenced the original media release over the richer content page, and potential applicants didn't always get the key dates and processes, and you guessed it, more emails and phone calls.
So it wasn't until we embarked on a website refresh that we saw just how much further we could have reached and how many more lives we could have improved. We could have really made those words fight.
We went through a full website discovery process and identified our key user groups and their top tasks. And then we recruited real-world participants for moderated usability testing of our current site.
So let's walk through that. We'll start with Mark. Mark was a participant from our sponsorship recipients group, and he relied on a screen reader. He helped us realise that alt tags like sponsorship opportunities gave him very little clue about what was being shown in the image. Missing alt tags excluded him from the content altogether.
And then we spoke to Pippa, who wasn't vision impaired, and she was looking for case studies on successful applications, but the content was all hidden in a video. She preferred to read and often had her computer on silent so it didn't distract others around her. We realised that transcripts assist users of all abilities.
Yeah, then we spoke to Priyanka, who repeatedly commented that there was just too much text. She's a busy mum running her business from home and trying to organise fundraising for her kids' school, so she wanted just to get her tasks done quickly with less mental effort. She was just trying to get through the day.
And lastly, we had Kenji, who used a mobile phone during his test, and he commented on how he clicked on a link thinking it would go to another page, but instead it loaded a PDF. Not only was the label misleading, but the PDF was slow to load, hard to navigate, and hard to read on his phone. He said being stuck in a PDF made him want to give up.
So with these insights, we found not only long-term opportunities, but also some really actionable quick wins.
We ran a report for pages with missing alt tags and developed meaningful descriptive text. We also reviewed all alt tags on our top 20 pages to ensure that they were descriptive, assisted our users, and that's right, that they would fight.
Yeah, and we ran a report for embedded videos and added transcripts to each one, starting with the most popular ones.
We tested the readability of our top 20 pages and found that some of it reached postgraduate level, placing far too much burden on our audience. We rewrote for grade 9 and cut anything non-essential. Now was the time to really make our words fight.
Yep, so we also reviewed the link labels on our top 20 pages to ensure they followed the Nielsen-Norman recommendation of being sincere, specific, substantial and succinct. We decided to draw a line with PDFs full stop, use them only for documents that needed to be printed.
And this was just the start. We had realised that far from being an afterthought, killer content is the foundation of great online experiences. We made real changes to the way we produce and manage our pages, and we've been reaping the benefits ever since. So that's a bit of a story we've taken you on, but it's a very indicative story that really does show some of the impacts of killer content and making sure that our words do fight for their place on our sites and help improve our sites.
Yeah, so I have no doubt that you could probably relate to some of the ideas in that story. And here are some ideas for how you can make your words fight. So make your words fight for space. Think, does your title need to be that long? Could you say more with less? How do you make them fight for a place? Have you started with information that's most important to the user first? Did you use a logical header hierarchy? Make your words fight for readability. Aim for a grade 9. Really, that should be the base. Aim lower if you can. Everyone benefits from simple to read content. We're busy, we've got things going on, we value our time, and we respect when you value our time. Is there a simpler alternative that will make sense to more people? For example, in excess of could be more than, prior to could be before. Make your words fight for relevance. Are your links and labels specific, sincere, substantial and succinct? And we've got a link here in the presentation which you'll be able to access to get a little bit more of a gist of how you can make that happen in your day-to-day. Finally, make your words fight to be seen. Think about the vision impaired uni student. Think about a father nursing a baby in one arm with a mobile device in the other. Think about a robot looking for keywords and meaning in order to get your page up in the search rankings. Use alt text and transcripts, convert PDF to HTML, write for scannability, and always be accessible. It's worth it.
It certainly is. So thank you very much for joining us today at this session on killer content and making our words fight for their life. we'd love to hear from you if you have any questions or would like to know anything more about the things we've talked about. So please feel free to get in touch with us via the email addresses on this slide. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for this breakout session. Today, I'm going to be talking about search user experience best practice across various informational sources with Amy Cole. Now, Amy Cole is the Digital Media Program Manager within the University of Arkansas System, the Agriculture Division. So in this conversation, we might be talking about a few things that are unfamiliar to some people who are not really familiar with their search. One of the things, the terminology that we're going to use is talking about repositories of content, which is being searched. So a repository is actually really at the core of search, but it also represents a scenario where an entire repository might be served back to a user without much care for their experience. So it's that whole 10 blue links on a page experience that we're trying to improve. So thanks, Amy, so much for talking to me about this today, because I know you've done a lot of work in this space. I understand that the division that you are in uses Funnelback for higher education search across 2 primary websites, plus an intranet search with unified search across the sites. So I will ask you at some point to explain how that works. But firstly, I think it would be apt if I asked you about what problem was it that you were faced with when you were acquiring a new site search?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure working with Funnelback, and we've been really pleased with the implementation, the whole process, actually. So originally, we used to have, it was a Google Search Appliance, a GSA. Our server team called it Big Bird because it was a big yellow server box that actually went into the back server room. And it was a very unintuitive system to use. You actually kind of had to be a little bit of a coder to be able to dissect how to make it work. There was no user interface. And so for about 4 or 5 years, I did not know who was searching our site. I didn't know the top search terms. I did not have any information, and I certainly couldn't customize any search results. Or if I could, I think I would have to have quit my first job to take on the job of figuring out how to work it. So once they did end of life for GSAs, they gave us a notice. They gave us about a year and said, we're phasing these out. And I was like, good, because we weren't putting any effort into it anyway. So we started doing a search for a search appliance, and we chose Funnelback, and it has solved a number of problems that I had as the primary manager of the information that goes on our website, and to deliver a better user experience for our clientele. We have people statewide, actually worldwide, that come to our website for information. We're like a big online encyclopedia, really. And it's so much information, it's difficult to create the user experience just with the navigation. So the site search is critical in helping people find what they need.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, because what you're saying there is like there's a lot of information about agriculture, obviously, and you're dealing with a worldwide audience.
Absolutely. It started with just local people, but I think once the word has spread that we have this information that no one else has, it's the search appliance has really helped us get more people to browse our site.
Yeah. So the other question I was going to ask you, I referred to this when I did the introduction about repositories. Now, I know that you have done a lot of work in terms of scoped searches. So just for the audience, in case they don't, I'm familiar with the term, a scope search refers to an instance where what's served in the search results is kind of leveraging off the main index, but it's only displaying what's deemed to be the most relevant results for the particular audience that will be using that site.
Right.
So how are you then using scopes to create this unique experience across your various sites?
That's a really good question. We wanted to tailor, because we have, say you type in a certain keyword, there could be any number of results that come back that it really depends on what they're looking for. So for example, if you're looking up the word travel, we have internal people who are looking for travel documents for financial services, but then you have external people who might be looking for travel bans for certain types of livestock. And so it really depends on the type of information that gets served back to them. And so depending on which site they're on, we can then tailor the results a little bit better for that audience. In fact, we can, depending on the word saved for travel, you can then say, do I want a document? Do I want the website? Do I want, which category do I want? Am I looking for a person who's in travel? So that's really, because we have so much information, it's really important to steer them in the right direction so we don't lose them. And we don't want to have them frustrated just searching so many results. Of course, people don't typically browse through the results. They want that on that first page.
Yeah.
And so that's really been great. And it learns over time. And so it starts figuring out over time which ones to serve up higher. And so that's been really great.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the AI component or the machine learning component of the Funnelback product as well. So you're kind of using a combination of like the scoped searches with a facet system as well?
We have used the facets. In fact, it was really interesting, the facets. We actually had to turn one of the facets off before we launched it because it showed the metadata in our document files, for example, was not entered correctly on thousands of documents that we had on our site. Our site is over 10,000 pages. And so it showed very quickly that it looked as if the authors of a lot of our files were a lot of secretaries. That's not true. And so it was a really good learning experience for us to go back and actually teach people, okay, the machine can only do so much. You have to tell it who wrote this document. And if you're not putting in that metadata, then it's garbage in, garbage out. And so it was a very good learning experience for me. And so I was actually able to take that and do a couple of training sessions on here's how you actually add metadata to files. And so we did have a lot of information is gleaned from the machine just finding stuff out there that I didn't even know was there. And so I discovered stuff on the site just through typing in some keywords and going, I didn't know we had that there. So it's been a really great experience so far.
Yeah, I'm so interested to hear you say that actually, because I know from experience as well that search and the analytics behind it really teaches people how to create extremely high quality content as well, yes, especially when it comes to metadata and all that kind of thing. A good search should be able to provide excellent results regardless of the metadata. However, when you're then implementing these other measures in order to make the experience easier for the user, good metadata can sometimes, or poor metadata, sorry, can sometimes be surfaced. So the quality of your content is also really, really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess with the scope searches, it's an opportunity to reduce your cost. Like it's an easy, and from a license point of view, it's a cost-effective way of alternatively, creating the scopes in order to not have to have all of these licenses going on. So you've got your Absolutely. Separate websites and your unified search, which is what you guys are doing, which is amazing. And then scoping it is just a way of working within the product to bring out the best of it.
Yes. Originally we just got Funnelback for our main domain, which was a public-facing site, and it showed me pretty quickly, and I've been sort of advocating for it for a while, is that we needed an internal site for the employees because we were the biggest users of our site. I found that out really quickly based on the data that was coming back from the most popular keywords that people were typing in. I saw very quickly the first top 8 of 10 keywords were clearly internal searches. I knew people weren't looking for our hiring form, for example, or something like that. I'm like, oh, this is us searching for this. And so I was able to use that information and advocate for, see, this is what's happening. This is what people are looking for. We need to move this over into a separate site. So we moved it over into a separate site. We have the intranet, the employee intranet, and the beauty of that is that we have the internet. So if somebody types on the employee site, it can crawl not just the employee site, but it does also crawl a couple of folders on the main website that didn't get moved over, bureaucracy, to the main employee site. And so it was a very custom search, because we knew that if we could not move these very important folders, they had to remain public for reasons. And then, so I can't move that. So if I can't move it, can I at least get people to those folders in an easy way on the employee site? And so say I type in travel on the employee site, it's going to pop me over to the main site, only indexing 2 or 3 of the folders. Hopefully that makes sense. And so it indexes the entire employee site, but also a couple of folders over here. And so it's able to look in several places, and we can narrow that search so it's not picking up client-facing stuff that isn't important.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important as well, because one point to make is that there are a lot of search services out there who can probably provide a great algorithm in order to serve the right search results. There's not that many of them that can aggregate different repositories, different systems, and then be able to customize it so that they're viewed in different ways depending on the sub-site that they're on.
Absolutely.
So this is actually one of, I guess, what you would call, a funnelback selling point. The idea that you can have so much control over that, just that some people call it a federated search. I like to call it like a unified search. And this is kind of what I was talking about with the repositories. You've got this enormous repository. Let's imagine, you've got, you're dealing with 3, but, perhaps it could be more, and you're dealing with over 10,000 documents.
Yeah.
Imagine if it was 100,000. Imagine if you were like a government department, for example, and you had 100,000 documents and you had 7 different websites. Being able to put it in one repository, but then serve it out in all sorts of different customizable ways is really interesting.
Yes, we have a different design, CSS styling even on the employee site than we do on the main site. And we have even tailored down further on the employee site. So if you type in a certain word, we don't pull in like social media handles, for example, on the employee site as a search result option, where we do on the main site. And I have to say it was a some usability testing where we made sure that, is this working for you? Are you getting results you expect? Is this delivering the results you're expecting? And by and large, we've just had a lot of good positive results from both site searches. I haven't had a lot of requests to really change too much. In fact, one of the things that I like best about the Funnelback user interface is the fact that I can see what people are searching for, but not getting results for. So that helps me identify the holes in our content. So I'm not guessing as to what people want to know about. It's actually there in a list, very specific keywords. Of course, some of them are misspelled, but I'm like, not sure what they're looking for there.
I was actually going to ask you about analytics in a little bit. But one question that I didn't pose to you before we started this conversation was about whether you've received good feedback in terms of your staff. Questions that are being asked that are perhaps being answered now, and a reduction in call volume and all that kind of thing. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, a couple of different. So we have 2 kind of audiences. The client facing, we just have people say we get a lot more people filling out our contact us form, for example. I've noticed because they're searching our site and they stumble upon this and then a story, and then they're just kind of browsing, looking for these certain words. And then I think what we really want ultimately with web content is for people to really dig into our content and then look at it and browse and look at more content. And the site search has really been available for them to do that. And in addition, on the employee side, we have had people actually request custom results. And so, for example, an old file, they want that to go away. And I'm like, I can, just let me tell it, and I can kind of force Funnelback to then ignore that file and then see something else. And people are really happy when they get those results. I think the user experience for like Googling something in the main Google as people call it, is their expectation is that it's practically going to read your mind. And so the challenge for me is to tell people, hey, if you don't put the content up there, somebody has to put it up there. It's not going to deliver something that's not there. And so that's been the beauty for me, is being able to log in and see what people are typing in or not typing in, or typing in incorrectly. And it just gives me a look at not only just user expectations, but it's also, it really just helps me back myself up. If I'm going into a phone call, for example, with somebody who has a request or something like that, I have that information there to present to them and say, no, this is really what's happening here. And I've really got nothing but good praise, especially when it launched the employee site.
Awesome. That's so good to hear. And so much of what you've said is really resonating with some of my experience as an account manager and a BDM as well. The other thing that your division is utilizing is the translucent search feature. So just to explain it for the audience in case they don't understand that term, it's just a method of acknowledging when there are multiple collections that are being unified in one search, but some of that content is requiring authentication, so it requires being logged into, and then it displays the search results in an appropriate way depending on how the organization wants it to be displayed. So sometimes that means that all results, say for example you've got your main site and your intranet, which is what you guys have, and you don't want a user just coming into the website being able to see all the stuff from your intranet, but you want it to be there for the user that actually is logged in. So perhaps it won't display at all until the user logs in, or it could be the situation where you're happy for it to be displayed, but it's still secure. So you might not display the search summary, for example. So it's just displaying the search results in an appropriate way. So how does that feature work for your division? How does it improve that audience experience, and how does it benefit the division?
Now this was a process to go through, because again, we had higher ups that it was an interesting process moving the employee site or making it into fruition, because not only did we at first have everything locked down. So the employee site, if you weren't an employee, you couldn't log in, you couldn't see it. That is the nature of a true intranet. Well, somewhere along the way, they decided they had some login issues on the end of some of the people who needed to be able to log in. For whatever reason, they weren't able to log in, usually user error, but anyway. So we said, okay, well, we've got to make these public, but you have to log in using a different credential. And so the way we worked that was on the employee side. If you type in a certain, depending on what your keyword was, there was some results were public and they wouldn't be sort of blurred out, but but it would give you the link name, like you could see, oh yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for, and it's very clear. There's a little lock icon that says your login is required. And so that way the employees, it's really just for the employees, but because some of our folders are public on the employee site, hopefully someday they won't be, but they are right now. So that way the general public who can access those folders at least can't access those specific files, and they can't access those specific subfolders. So it was a very interesting process. I felt like I kept coming back to you guys and saying, okay, here's another scenario. Can you help me with this? And it was solved. I mean, I'm sure it was very complicated, but it did not seem that complicated. You guys took care of it so quickly, and it was great because that solved a myriad of problems, because I did not have to tell people, no, you can't have your site the way you want it. So we can still have the site the way we want it, but just be aware that this is the interface. And I think people are fine with that. I've not had any issues from anybody saying that they were upset that they had to log into something. They pretty much understood this was a protection file.
Yeah, absolutely. And translucent search is something it's not brand new, but it's relatively new, and so it's really good to hear that it's being used in a way that is really, really valuable to your organization. So I'm actually very happy, personally, I'm very happy to hear that. So in terms of analytics, what are the capabilities within Funnelback that are the most useful to you? You spoke about being able to identify when a user is either using a wrong term or misspelling or anything like that. Is there anything else in the analytics capabilities that's very useful to you? Sorry.
Gosh, yes. It's there's so much that it can do, and I know I'm not using it to the fullest of extent. I went in there the other day and I saw the accessibility analytics and the information about what files are or are not accessible. That was a real eye-opener. And so I was able to then look at that information and send it to our accessibility manager, say, hey, you need to take a look at this, because according to Funnelback, this is a huge gap here in our accessibility. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, there's a QA, what's working, what's not working, and even the top misspelled words. It actually helps me figure out what sometimes we find that we've got words misspelled on the site too. So it's really kind of an all-in-one package, honestly. And I also enjoy using, I don't know so much it's about analytics, but I really like the fact that I can create best bets. And so I can force people to see, like, almost not like an ad, but I can then customize what they see based on the certain key terms that they type in. And I've really enjoyed that too.
Yeah, that's good. I like the best bets. And also, do you use Curator as well? Because there's
I need to start using it more.
Yeah, because you'll find it's a very similar function. However, the Curator provides you with a lot more flexibility in how you actually implement it. There's a lot more parameters and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's good. It's really lovely to hear that you're using the tool to the best of your
Trying to, yes.
Yeah. So I guess Curator or Best Bets is a feature that you would use when you're reacting to your audience needs, which is exactly what you've just described. And if there's a particular spike in a query or something like that, that would be how you would manage it?
Yes. I really need to just set a reminder to log in every week, because it changes kind of wildly every week depending on. It's funny because I have people wanting to, for example, I want to get rid of this page on the website or this section. I was like, hang on, let me go see if people are looking for that or some variation of that. And so the way I'm able to use the analytics also is in those kinds of features is that I can see, okay, well, you're using this word and it's not delivering results. So how about you change that word, even though that's what your content is about? Because we have a lot of PhDs writing our content, they don't always use the language that people are using to search. And right now I've noticed that people it's slowly starting to do more long tail keywords and phrases. And so it's changing a little bit over time. And so I'm interested to see how voice search changes how people find things on our website too. So that's something that I'm curious to watch that trend over time.
So you've implemented the voice search then?
The main thing that I'm doing is looking at how long tail their keywords are. And so if they're typing in how to, like you would on a voice search, for example, that's really what I'm keying in on. Right now it's like 1 to 2 keywords, but we are starting to get a lot more questions actually typed into the search field.
With that natural language query.
That's what I have a feeling more people are going to be using that from the public. I don't think people it's very interesting actually, the type of people that they're using those long tail keyword searches and what they're expecting to find. And so it's actually changed the approach to how I teach people how to write their content, because I said, if you don't put that phrase in there somehow, I don't know how in the world it's going to find it. So you've just got to think, how do you use the search appliance? It's not just typing in one word. It's a question they're having.
I personally, through my experience with Funnelback, I personally find the natural language query a very interesting topic of discussion. And I must say, within the office, we've had a lot of roundabout chat about that. So I'll be very interested to see how you progress with that.
Because we have any numbers of subjects that would be very interesting about on our website.
Well, thank you so much. That was a really targeted look at how a division is able to prioritize the user experience and ensure that when you're writing content or when you're managing content or when you're searching content, you can make it the best experience that it can be in terms of ensuring that everyone is able to find what they're looking for. And you're dealing with a lot of audiences as well. So you've got obviously your internal and your external audience. You're talking about global. People are obviously coming to your website from all around the world. And, you know, we know that when a user starts to search for something, it means that they already know what it is that they want. And they're looking for something that they can't necessarily find through your navigation, or maybe don't have the time to find through your navigation. So if you can't find what you're looking for immediately, oftentimes in this day and age when we're so used to being served, as you spoke about, that Google type experience, which what we sometimes describe as the www search, not the site search, you often just give up. So it's one of the most important things about a search strategy, you know, being able to really pinpoint both your user, what they're looking for, so that you can then structure your search content. You can build those relevant frameworks or strategy to optimize your website. And then you also have to really be able to keep it flexible enough to be able to respond to those changing audience needs. So I'm going to wrap it up now. But I think it would be fair to say as a conclusion that a combination of high quality search results is very important. Flexible features is very important. And all of that stuff puts your organization in a very good position to deliver an excellent user experience when they're visiting your site. But as you brought out, it's very crucial to be able to develop an understanding of how analytics can help you adjust that strategy and utilize the tools that are at your disposal. And I think that's what we would say that we consider to be best practice.
Right. Yeah. We use it sort of as a little mini usability study that we have the results for every day.
That's fantastic.
You can log in and see what's going on with it. It's really great.
That's fantastic. So thank you so much for talking to us about how the Agricultural Division of the University of Arkansas uses their search, and thanks for being so interested in the analytics side of things as well. It's been really interesting to chat to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for having me.
No worries. And just for the audience, I just want to mention that if there's anything that's been brought up in the chat that you'd like more information on, please contact your account manager. Otherwise, you can submit an inquiry through the website. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Well, hi guys. That's it for Squiz Summit 2020. Thank you for attending. Now, as I mentioned at the very beginning, there are some differences with this being a digital event. One of them is that we can't see your faces to judge reactions, and we can't talk to you in the corridors in between events either. So it's more important than ever that we get your feedback through the feedback forms that we send you by email. That's it for 2020. It's a wrap.